Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session on physiology of bone and calcium metabolism. As you know, we are going through the endocrine physiology under CBME curriculum. I'm Dr. Swati Tikare. So let's get on to this session, which is based on the competencies and objectives. So the today's competency is PY 8.1, describe the physiology of bone and calcium metabolism. This particular competency, we need to understand this in detail before we move on to the hormones that regulate calcium homeostasis. So this acts as a basis for the session. Coming to the objectives, by the end of this class, the student should be able to enumerate the important functions of calcium, list the important dietary sources of calcium and phosphate, describe the distribution, absorption, daily requirements, and fate of calcium, describe the plasma concentration and functions of phosphorus. List the bone cells and enumerate their functions. So basically everything related to calcium homeostasis, we are going to learn in today's class before we go on to know more about how the hormonal regulation of calcium is going to happen. So let's begin with the functions of calcium. So calcium is a very important ion and it is very ubiquitous and useful in many functions. So the foremost important function of calcium is its role in bone formation, then in neuromuscular activity, during excitation of nerve and muscle, in action potential, everything it is required. During muscle contraction, in both skeletal and cardiac muscle contraction, calcium ions are essential. For maintenance of normal cardiac rhythmicity, it is essential. In blood coagulation, intracellular second messenger, I'm not uh, describing all these in detail because each one of them we learn at a different point of time within physiology. So the next function for in formation of milk. So these are some of the important functions of calcium, and it is also essential for secretion of neurotransmitter release. So let's just see a few pictures. So you know in nerve muscle how much calcium binding is important for the contraction of the skeletal muscle. That's what is shown here. In this diagram, you can show an action potential of the cardiac muscle. The calcium is responsible for the plateau phase of the cardiac action potential. This is one more diagram showing the presynaptic terminal where entry of calcium is essential for the release of the neurotransmitter. Next, this is a diagram where we were showing the entry of calcium is essential for release of certain hormones or secretions. Here the insulin release is shown. So these are some of the places where calcium is essential. The most important, of course, is in the formation and mineralization of the bone. Coming to the dietary sources of calcium. What are the dietary sources? Calcium, as you all know, it is very rich in milk and milk products, eggs, fish, vegetables, fruits like oranges. It is nowadays also fortified in bread and some other cereals and all those places. And nuts are especially rich in calcium. Very good source of calcium are nuts. Then hard water, though we use softeners to soften the water and we don't use the hard water is a very good source of calcium. The phosphates, which is always required in addition to calcium for the mineralization of the bones, is present in the same dietary sources as calcium. Okay. And in addition, it is present in high amounts in cereals and pulses, whereas phosphates are absent in hard water. The daily requirement, calcium, we need about 1000 mg or 1 gram of calcium per day. and phosphates about 700 mg per day. These are the requirements, roughly an easier way to remember for the adults. Whereas in adolescents, these needs are higher where there is more bone growth. So these are the daily requirements. Next, coming to the calcium distribution in the body. So remember that total body calcium is around 1100 to 1200 grams. Okay, overall about 1 kg. This is for an average man weighing about 70 kgs. 1 kg of calcium is there in our body. And about 99% of this whole calcium is present in just bone and the teeth. Okay, uh, only about 1% is present in certain cells, like the muscle cells predominantly, and 0.1% is present in the body fluids. So that's it. 99% in bones, 4 to 5 grams in muscles, and about 1 gram is present in the ECF. Okay, for 1000 gram, if we roughly just take the total body calcium is 1000, then 1% of it would be 10 grams. Of those 10 grams, 9 grams are present in several cells, including the muscles, whereas 1 gram is present in the ECF. Whatever is present in the ECF is what will be there even in the blood, I mean, and serum levels when we tell all this is present in that part. Let's see those details. One more pictorial diagram to show that bone is this whole length if it is calcium. Okay, this whole 1 kg of calcium is there. Then up to this point is 99%, literally 98.9%, okay, is in the bone, okay, as hydroxyapatite. Whereas 1% is of total body calcium is present in the cells. In that 0.1% is present in extracellular fluid. In the next diagram, we will see all these details. That is this 0.1% of total body calcium or 1 gram, how it is divided. Okay. So the normal plasma calcium level is 9 to 11 mg per deciliter. So this is the total calcium that is present. It can be divided into diffusible form and non-diffusible form. Okay, so the diffusible form is around 5.36 mg per deciliter, a little more than 50%, or it can be roughly 50%. Non-diffusible 4.64 mg per deciliter. This is in a bound form, along with majority with albumin, little bit with globulin. Anyways, it is bound form, and this is the reserve calcium. Whereas this diffusible means which is available for exchange. Again, this diffusible form can be divided into two forms. One is the ionic or free calcium. Okay, and this is the physiologically active one. Next, non-ionic calcium. It is present in complex with bicarbonates and citrates. It has very small value. So this is how the plasma calcium is divided, diffusible and non-diffusible, and indiffusible, ionic and non-ionic calcium. So roughly you can see here, ionized calcium makes out about 50% of the total plasma calcium. Next, this diagram, though it is appearing very complex, is very important, very, very important. Please write down these places in one this diagram. First, write a bone at one end, the kidney at one end, at the bottom. Then this is the part of intestine. Okay, in this middle we have kept ECF. Okay, and here there are the cells. Okay, so these are the areas where the calcium will go and there is an exchange. So we will begin with the calcium intake. What we said, the normal calcium intake, dietary intake should be around 1000 mg per day. So if a person is taking around 1000 mg per day, that is entering into the gut and it is getting reabsorbed, then 700 mg is what is getting absorbed. Okay. At the same time, 600 mg is secreted into the gut, okay, by some secretions. There are so many secretions that are happening in the gut, the digestive juices and all that. So during that, about 600 mg is secreted. So now if we take 1000 is coming as dietary intake, 600 is secreted. Total we have 1600 mg in the gut. Out of this 1600 mg, 700 mg is getting absorbed. So what is left? Around 900 mg is left. So this 900 mg is actually excreted in feces every day. Okay. So out of 1000 mg, literally 900 mg is getting excreted through the feces. Next, coming to the extracellular fluid. What did we say? We have 1 gram in the ECF. So 1000 mg is here, which is available for exchange across the various places. So this was the exchange occurring with the gut. Now coming to the kidneys. So the ECF, the amount of total, you know that kidney receives a lot of blood flow and many times the blood is going to go through the kidney. So during the entire day, about 10,000 mg of calcium is filtered or enters the kidney. Okay, 10,000 mg. Okay, recycled many times. You need not get confused that only intake is 1000, how 10,000. So many times it is getting recycled. So overall in a day, 10,000 mg is getting filtered in the kidney, and this kidneys reabsorb 9,900 mg per day. Almost everything they are reabsorbing except for 100 mg, which is excreted in urine. Okay, so 100 mg in urine. Then coming to the exchange with the bone. Bone, 1000 grams of uh, calcium is present in the bone. So the 1000 grams is converted here as mg. Anyway, you need not worry. You can write it as 1000 gram itself. So 1000 gram, around 20 gram is exchangeable. Okay. So 20 gram is exchangeable, but daily around 500 mg or whatever. We can't be fixed about this particular the amount, if there is more or less based on the stage of growth, stage of bone remodeling. Okay, this could be a very variable. 500 mg per day. Roughly, we have just given that whatever is deposited, it is also reabsorbed, whatever goes in and comes in. So in this way, this calcium is moving from the intake and getting exchanged across all these structures. Okay, so the intake is 1000 mg, 900 mg is excreted in the feces, 100 mg in the urine. So the almost every day, if 1000 is taken, then this can be managed in this fashion. So this is the input and output of the calcium and how the exchange takes place across the various organs. Next, we'll go to phosphate distribution. Phosphate is also an important thing. So 500 to 800 grams of phosphate is present. The phosphate, 85% of the phosphate is present in skeleton and 15% in soft tissue. Okay. In other words, if we want to divide phosphate as organic and inorganic, phosphate can be present in the cellular elements of blood as organic, whereas in the ECF, in the serum, it is present as inorganic form, monovalent and divalent forms. Again, in the serum, some of it is in the brown form and some of it is in the free form. So 55% of phosphate is in the free form. Okay, you need not remember the individual values. So 10% is protein bound, 35% is bound with sodium, calcium, magnesium, and other ions. So the total serum phosphate level is 12 mg per deciliter. Okay, calcium was 11. Serum phosphate is somewhat nearby at 12 mg per deciliter. So this is the phosphate distribution. Let's see the functions of phosphate. So phosphate gives rigidity to bone and teeth. It is important for phosphorylation and dephosphorylation. In this way, it controls several enzymes. In the regulation of pH of blood and urine, it is very important. Part of several essential organic molecules like nucleic acids. They are also part of molecules like ATP, cyclic AMP, 2,3-DPG, etc. Okay, so phosphate has all these roles, and we need to remember that a product of how much calcium and phosphate is there, this is always a constant. So if calcium increases, phosphate will decrease, and phosphate increases, the calcium will decrease. So the solubility product of calcium and phosphate is a constant, and it is always maintained unless in certain pathology when both may increase and the solubility product itself may increase. Okay, otherwise under normal conditions they are inversely related. Now let's learn little more in detail about what is bone physiology, because we have to understand too this for our understanding of the calcium homeostasis. So what is this bone? This bone is a specialized connective tissue which is impregnated with two salts, calcium and phosphate salts. Okay. Then constantly there is remodeling. So what's this remodeling? So the bone structure is not fixed. Constantly old bone is getting resorbed, means removed, whereas the new bone is laid. So this is what we call remodeling. This cycle takes about 100 days, and this will keep going on and on. Bone is a vascularized structure and the blood flow is around 200 to 400 ml per minute. In the bone, we have two parts. The outer part is known as the compact or cortical bone, which constitutes 80% of any bone, whereas the inner spongy or trabecular bone constitutes the rest of the 20%. And the protein in the bone is collagen type 1, which is laid in the triple helix manner. This collagen is so strong that it is as strong as steel. So this is the special type of protein that is present in the bone. First of all, the protein itself is strong, and the mineralization with calcium and phosphate makes it much stronger. So coming to some more aspects of bone growth, we have to understand this. We have this diagram here. Okay, this is shown in an embryo. Okay, these parts which are shown, they are actually the cartilage. Okay, first the entire shape of the bone is made up with cartilage. Later on, the bone starts replacing the cartilage. Okay, so if this is the embryo, then in the fetus, this is how the new center for bone growth is formed at the ends of the bones. Okay, new centers are formed, and growth is happening in both the direction. Growth in bone length. So here, this you can see this type of a bone you can see in a child. So here you can see the two epiphyses, the upper epiphyseal end and the lower epiphyseal end. The central bone structure is called as diaphysis. And between the diaphysis and epiphysis, you see the structure. This is called as the epiphyseal plate. This is made up of cartilage. Here also we have an epiphyseal plate. Okay, so the bone grows both linearly as well as by width. And as you know, the epiphyseal, until the epiphyseal plate closes, the growth, linear growth is going to continue. And this epiphyseal plate closure occurs for different bones at different ages in the child. One may close at 8 years, another by 10, by another by 12, like this, another by 14 or 15. So based on this, when we do an X-ray, if by seeing these epiphyseal plates, we can actually make out the age of the individual, especially in the child, not in a complete adult. but in the growing child, we can make out the age. So let's see how these bone formation occurs. The bone formation occurs basically by three ways. The first one is the endochondral bone formation. Okay, what we mean by endochondral is chondral. First, the bone is not formed. First, a cartilage is formed. The bone is formed actually by a cartilage, and later it is replaced with the bone. So this happens for long bones, as we have seen here in this diagram. The next way is membranous bone formation. Here, the bone is directly laid by certain mesenchymal cells. So this type of bone is, example is the clavicle and the mandible. These are laid in this format. Directly the bone is laid. The last one is about what is endosteal bone formation. When we mean endosteal, this is what is happening continuously. Continuously bone is laid and also removed. That is the remodeling. This is known as the endosteal bone formation. So we basically have these three types of bone formation. So how exactly this bone remodeling happens? What are the cells involved? Which cells are there in the bone? So the most important cells are the osteocytes, are the bone cells, which are present within the substance of the bone. Okay, so this is the osteocytes surrounded by the matrix, bony matrix, protein matrix. These are the osteocytes. Next is the osteoblast. What is an osteoblast? Osteoblast is a cell that is present on the lining of the bone, and it is lays down the bone, okay, for formation. Whereas the osteoclast is coming from the pro, pro-osteoclasts that are nothing but cells which are removing the bone. Okay, so we have osteocytes, which are the bone cells, osteoblasts, which lay the bone, and osteoclasts, which remove the bone or do resorption of the bone. So let's see how it is forming. So this is a bone, old bone. Okay, in between the cement line, this is the new bone. Okay, so on the surface, we are having osteoblasts here. There is an osteoclast here. So in the resting state, okay, no bone is formed. Resorption means osteoclasts are active and they are removing bone. That's how there is a depression that is formed. Reversal, or again formation of the bone by the osteoblasts. Then there may be mineralization, more adding of the calcium and phosphate. And again the resting state. Like this whole remodeling will keep repeating itself. So this is a closer picture of how the osteoclasts remove the bone. They will anchor themselves at the ends of the bones and form a compact structure or airtight or tight compartment inside, where it is going to, there is acid secretion and lysosomes, and it will make a compartment where it will lower the pH. Acid is released and it will cause bone resorption in this area. Okay, so osteoclast creates an area between itself and the bone. Proton pump acidifies the area to pH 4. That means there is a proton pump which will pump hydrogen ions here and make this whole compartment more acidic. The acidic pH will dissolve the bone. At any given time, about 5% of the bone in the entire body is getting remodeled. And how does it remodel? It is in response to the stress and strain on the skeleton. So this is the job of the osteoclast, of removing the cells. So one more picture showing resting state, osteoclasts, bone resorption, removal of bone, osteoblasts, formation of bone. Then this is the old bone, this is the new bone, and then they go for a resting state, where again the bone resorption will occur later. So ultimately, if osteoclasts and osteoblasts are functioning properly in coordination, then there is a normal bone. Bone resorption is equal to bone formation. But if the osteoclastic activity is higher, there is more bone resorption than bone, sorry, there is more bone resorption than bone formation. It leads to osteoporosis, excess osteoclastic activity. Okay, more bone is removed. Whereas if more bone is formed than what is removed, there is excess bone that is formed, that leads to what we call osteopetrosis. So just let's see about osteoporosis a little bit. So ultimately, osteoporosis means a condition where there is low bone mass, the bone is very fragile, and there is increased risk of fracture. The females are more likely to get osteoporosis, especially after menopause, after the estrogen, progesterones are very low in level, they are more prone to get osteoporosis. And let's see a picture how it sees. It becomes very, as the name says, it becomes very porous, becomes very fragile. This is the normal bone matrix. This is how it appears. Whereas bone with osteoporosis is like this. So definitely it is more risky and they can have fractures. Whereas the opposite of this is osteopetrosis. Look at this picture. This picture on the left side is healthy bone thickness and density. Okay? This is how the thickness will appear. Whereas in osteopetrosis, see the increased bone thickness as well as density. Okay? So the cortical bone usually appears thicker, and in between, in the center, the trabecular spongy bone is appearing thinner. But here the density is so uh, high that the entire bone is appearing totally thick and dense. So this is osteopetrosis. It's a hereditary skeletal disorder characterized by marked increase in bone density. Bone density is due to defect in remodeling caused by failure of normal osteoclast function. So here what happens, the osteoblasts are doing the job unabated. Okay, they go on laying bone, but osteoclasts are abnormal. They are not able to resorb. Resorption is not done. So there is thickening of the cortical bone and cancellous bone causing sclerosis, what we call. Okay, so with this, we have completed today's objectives. So we enumerated the important functions of calcium, listed the important dietary sources of calcium and phosphate, described the distribution, absorption, daily requirements, and fate of calcium, described the concentration and functions of phosphorus, that is phosphate, and also listed the different bone cells, and we enumerated their functions. So once we know this background, we will be able to understand better the hormones that are regulating the calcium homeostasis, which we will be dealing in the next class. So thank you.